Hi everyone, great to see you in class today. This video is an overview of Blender and what we touched on today. So yeah, let's get modeling. Okay, so in Blender we discussed that there's the file, import, export. There's the load factory default if you don't like what you've saved as a startup file. Under edit, you've got your preferences. In preferences, we can adjust the resolution scale so that we can make the fonts a little bit bigger or more legible, particularly like here where I'm making a video. If we go to inputs, if you're on a laptop, you can emulate a numpad. I prefer to use just a full-size keyboard. In system, under CUDA and optics, make sure that you've got your graphics card turned on here. The undo steps here, you can make that 256. That'll give you a lot more undo. And in the add-ons, you want to make sure, I can show the enabled ones, but here, where is it? Node Wrangler. Have I got it turned on? Maybe not. Just type Node, turn this off. Node Wrangler. You need to enable Node Wrangler, and that will become obvious later on. It should automatically save preferences, but you can also just click save preferences there, and there we go. So there are different layouts here: a layout, a modeling layout, a sculpting layout, the UV editing layout, and we can see the UV for the box here. We've got the shading layout as well here. But I prefer just to use this layout mode and then to pull out several windows. When we talk about that, if we come up to this top corner, you'll see a little plus symbol appear, and if you click and drag, you can introduce new windows. So if I just come here and click and drag down, I can introduce new windows. You can also click on the side you want, like this side, and click and drag this way, and you can absorb windows and come down to the bottom corner and absorb that window. So let's just pull a couple out like that, and then what we can do on this icon here is, instead of being the 3D viewport, we could put it into the shading editor, for example. And in this viewport we could take our camera view and set it up so that it's got the camera view, got the shading editor here, and our model. We can turn on here our rendering modes. We've got wireframe, shading, shaded preview, and rendering. Nothing much will happen here for that. And then also under here, the shading, we can click on this button, and you can use matte cap. And if we press here, you can get these different matte caps which look pretty good and help you differentiate your model sometimes. So that's quite a handy way of viewing your model. So also we've got these icons down here, and these are all our editing icons for our different features. And then up here is our scene and all the objects in our scene, and as we add more objects, more things will appear. Under the tool and under the rendering, we need to set the rendering engine not on Eevee. This is a real-time like gaming engine rendering. We need to turn it to cycles, and we need to turn the device from CPU to GPU. Here we can change the viewport samples. Instead of rendering 1024, we can make it 256. And here on the noise threshold, we could change it from 0.01. We could just change it to 0.1. And then here we can go divided by 4. and make it 1024. In the output, we can see here the output of our camera, and if we change this to say 1080, now we've got a square camera, Instagram style. And if we go back to 1920, we get the right layout, and we can adjust our resolution. We can also adjust it here by clicking here from 100 say to 50, and it will reduce the rendering size down, which is quite handy. 100, make it quicker. Also, just make sure you're in PNG, RGBA. Here we can look at the scene properties, we can look at the units, and we're in metric, and obviously Blender starts in meters, but we can change it to millimeters if we want. In the world, we're going to turn the strength, it's got a sun built in, so we're going to turn that strength down to 0. And what we should see is if we put this into a rendered mode and we get rid of this point light, the scene goes completely black, where if we have this on 1, there's a bit of light added into the scene. So we always want to set that to 0, in like a photography studio, that it's black. And because we've got an object in here, we've got our modifier, and we can add a modifier, for example, generate. We'll use bevel, and we'll use solidify and subdivision. You'll use subdivision a lot. If we add subdivision and we subdivide a square, it turns into a circle. And if we add more subdivisions, the smoother the circle will get. And we can adjust our rendering subdivisions as well. You'll note that the actually we've got our material, and this already has a material added in. We can here in the material we can change all of the values, like we can change the color, and if we go to rendering it'll change the color. Obviously we don't have a light yet. We can change the coat and make it glossy, make the undersurface rough, whole bunch of things in here. We'll cover a little bit of the materials in a minute. And if we want to delete this material, we just click on the minus here and it's removed the material. And then we can always add a new material back in here. And then we've got a material back, and we can double click it and rename it like that. Okay, so the important thing to remember, and there's 2 of them, is that we need to look at what mode we're in. So here we're in object mode, and we can also go into edit mode. And the shortcut is pressing tab on the keyboard. So in edit mode we can edit all of these edges, and we can also in edit mode change the UV values. And you'll note up here that we've got vertex, edge and face, and we can press 1 on the keyboard for vertex. If we click on this now, we can adjust this vertex. If we press 2 and we click on the box, we can adjust the edges. And if we click on 3, we can click on and edit the faces. Now you need to remember that you are in editing mode, and you can see these icons here, and they change when we move from edit to object. Sometimes you can get tricked, so it's important to know which mode you're in, because you can't edit your model like its shape or the vertices or the faces, or add extra subdivision loops in object mode. You have to do it in the editing mode. So then the other most important thing is that you need to click on this little arrow here, and we can press the N key on our keyboard. So if you press N, you'll get these tools appear here, and we need to make sure that we keep our scale to 0. So if I click on this cube and I press S for scale and I scale it up, note that this scale has changed, and in order to map materials correctly we need to set this scale back to 1. you know, if we have denim material or a technical sports fabric, that fabric is in a real world you know, sizing, 100 mil by 100 mil. It's got a particular size of warmth and width and material design. So if we put it onto this scale and it wasn't on one, the material would actually stretch up larger than it really is in the real world, for example. So we have to reset this scale, and we can do it by coming up to Object and going Apply, and then All Transformations or Scale. You'll note the shortcut is Control A. So if we just click here and go Control A, we can set the scale, and now it's gone to 1. This applies for everything that we do, and when I make a backdrop, I'll show you what that means. So I'm just going to hide that out of the way. Okay, so we can move things by pressing the G key, and we can move our objects. I'm just going to change the rendering mode. So if we come in here, we can press G, move it around freeform. We can press the axes like the Z, and we can move it in the Z axis constrained. We can press the Y, and move it in the Y, and we can press X, and it'll move it in the X. And you'll note that corresponds to this dialog box here. We can also press here on the Move tool and drag up. And you'll note that it gave you the shortcut tip, Shift Spacebar or G. Rotate is R, and Scale is S. And so we can move our object, and we can grab these little tools and we can move it around. And we can also do that in the X, Y, and Z. And if we go into edit mode, so press Tab, and we choose the edges, we can grab an edge and we can go G for moving, and we can move that edge. If we press G again, it'll move it along an axis, and we can edit the ball along the closest axis. We can press 1 on the keyboard and edit a point and do the same thing, G, and we can move a point around. If we press G again, it'll lock it to its retrospective axis. And we can do the same thing obviously for a face. So, you know, we can go G and we can move it around. The other thing we can do is press E for extrude, and then we can extrude out another face. And you can see that we're bringing more detail to our model. We can do the same thing here. E, extrude it up. Press S and scale it. And then go G and move it up. Oh, it's crossed over itself. Go G. Sorry, E for extrude. And then go S for scale. We can scale it. You can hold the Shift key while you're doing things, and it slows down the process. And we can start editing our model. Get out of edit mode. Control Z, Control Z. Undo it a couple of times. Okay, get out of edit mode. Press Tab. The other thing we can do is we can bring in features. So I'm just going to delete that rectangle. And if I press Shift A, I can add, and I can add a mesh, and in mesh I can add a cube, I can add a UV sphere. I can move this up. I could look in here from the X, and I could adjust the height, and I can also go Shift A and put in a plane, and then press I'm going to press N so that we can see here. And if I select that and I press S for scale and I scale it, note that the scaling has changed here. Yep, 3.1, 3.1, 3.1, 6.39 equates to double that dimension there. So in order to get that back to 1, we go Control A and apply scale, and now it's 1. Okay, this is really important. The other thing we can do is we can add in under Shift A, we can add in lights, and we can add area lights and then pull the area lights up. And by having an area light, if I turn on the rendering, you'll note here, if I push that down, it goes black. If I pull that light out, and then over here we've got the light settings, and I can adjust its wattage up like that. And here in the spread, wide spread gives you a very blurred shadow, and if I tighten this spread up, it gives you a much tighter shadow and tighter light. We can change the area light from a square to a rectangle or a disc, or we can change it to an ellipse. But we can just leave it as a square for now. Okay, so now we've done that, we can actually make another light. So what we could do is grab this light and go Control C, Control V, move it out. We can rotate it around the X, so R, X, and rotate the light. And then we can copy it, Control C, Control V, and make a copy and bring it over here. And then rotate it again by pressing R, X, and rotate it around the X, and then light the other side up. These lights are very tight here, so we'll click on the one we want to edit and we'll increase its fall off spread from 42 and make it like 180, and do it the same to this one, make it much brighter, and then this one here we'll actually pull that up a bit and turn its power down. We can start rendering. What you'll notice is that this sphere is faceted, and we need to add a subdivision modifier to put more detail in. We can press here and actually we can select the object and right click and say shade smooth, and you'll note that it's shaded smooth. But if we go into a rendering preview, what it will show up is that the edges are actually faceted. So to get rid of the faceted edge, we need to add some subdivision. So here under the modifiers with the sphere selected, we can add a modifier, generate subdivision, and make it 2 in the viewport, and now we've got a really nice clean edge to our sphere. The other thing that we can do is, for example, we can grab this background and make it a backdrop. So if we go into tab, so edit mode, select edges instead of faces, grab this back edge, press the E key for extrude. It's unconstrained, so press Z and pull it up. Now if I press tab, with scale is 1, but if we didn't set this scale and we added a fillet here and then we scaled it to 1, the fillet will shrink. You can always fix it, but it's good to scale things first and then go back in and edit them. So I'm going to click back into this edge, add a modifier, and add a bevel. And what we'll see is my sphere is 1 meter in diameter. So here if I grab the amount and I increase it, you'll see that a 1 segment bevel has been applied. I can add segments, so 4 is enough, and you can see here we've got a curve appearing. So if we press tab and get out of edit mode and select this object and then right click and go shade smooth, that's nice and smooth. But this is jagged. Now that works if we're never going to see the edge of the background, but if we are, we can add a subdivision modifier to it. So here, if we go add modifier and add a subdivision in the stack, you can see here it's gone round, but we can just set it to simple, and now it's smoothed all of this out. and it's doubled the geometry. So if I press 2, now it's doubled the geometry. Alright, the other thing that we covered in class today was how to add some materials. So a good thing to do is, we've made this backdrop, but we can actually create a quick material to check its UV. So here we can go new, get a new material, click anywhere to deselect, click on the principled BCDF, and with Node Wrangler added in the add-ins, you can go Control T, and what it's done is it's added a texture image, the mapping, and the UV coordinates directly into this material. And if we click new, and instead of blank, add a color grid and go new image, you'll see a color grid appears in the rendering. And you'll note that the color grid has been stretched right up here. Now that's because we don't have any UVs set out properly. This typically will happen, to a CAD model if you bring it into something. So the way to fix it is to either go up to the UV editing tool and select the object that you want to edit. So just press A for all, and then you've got your layout here. Or what I like to do is go back to layout, and I'll just change here the view to UV editor, and there it is there. So if we go into edit mode, press tab, and we've got that selected. There's our box, and you'll note that it's just a square. So what we have to do is we need to, I'm going to delete this subdivision on that. We need to apply this bevel. So I'm just going to click here and go apply, but it's grayed out. So get out of edit mode, go apply, go back into edit mode, and what we'll notice when we press A for all is in here we've got a little UV map, and we've got this big base. So here we can see it finishes at H1 and A1, so A1, H1, and then this bit's stretched. So if we select it all, A, and go to UV, Unwrap UVs, you'll note here that now it's properly unwrapped the UVs, and the corresponding mapping appears on our geometry. So this is really important to be able to get the surface UV mapped, so that when we put a texture on, the texture maps correctly across our object. This is really quite important. Okay, so we can press tab, and now we've got a UV texture coordinate worked out. If that texture coordinate's too big, we can always come back in here, go into edit mode, press A for all, press S for scale, and then scale up or scale down our texture to get the texture the right size. And because we've got this grid, we can then get all our other models, say with the same material, to the right size so that they all look the same. Because if a material is made in a factory, it comes out exactly the same, no matter what object it's applied to. So that's really an important thing to think about. Get out of edit mode. Alright, so what we're going to do is, we've got the fundamentals down pat. The last thing I'll show you is, if we get the shader editor back and create a new material, in here what we can do is we can adjust the base color, we can adjust all the hue saturation values, we can make it metallic. You can see it's quite metallic now up here. that. We can change its roughness to being really shiny or being really rough. We can turn it down. The one that is really interesting to see is coat, and we can turn the weight of the coating up, the exterior gloss on the paint, and we can turn the roughness up of the material in underneath. And we can change the IOR value, which is the value of the clear coat on top. We can change its tint for the underneath and a whole range of other things. So it's quite a fun tool to use. And we could actually put a material on here. So I don't know if I've got one handy, but we'll have a go. If I press for Node Wrangler, Control Shift T, I can choose a file, and we'll have a material here somewhere. Maybe in D. No, that will be in H. No, they're not here. Where are my materials? G drive. Yeah, here we go. In G drive, I've got some materials here somewhere. Rendering materials, and maybe ambient CG, and look at this fabric, and I can turn it into this mode here. Yeah, so I can look at this tartan material, and I know that I want to choose the base color. So the color, I want to choose control the displacement, the normal, and the roughness. And then if I go principle, it'll add all those materials in onto this. And then here, if I adjust my scale, and the tip here is that if you go to the top X of the scale, press the left mouse button, drag it down to select them all, and then change your scale of your material. Your material will scale properly. Now this is on UV, and the UV sphere is not a great example. And we can choose different types of mapping, like normal, generated, say camera, so it's aligned to the camera view. But the best thing to do is to use UV for your appropriate object and get the mapping working well. Okay, that covers most of the materials and how to use Node Wrangler. The thing I'll do now is look at how to bring in a gravity sketch object. So we've got landing pad open from Gravity Sketch, and if you've got a Gravity Sketch file, you can export it. And here's the size of the file, and it's important to note this down. Now we're going to use OBJ, and we're going to turn the geometry preferences into single, and we're going to put subd export, not to render, because that will render out all the subdivided mesh, but we want to put it to control, and that will give us the control net. If you think of using Fusion, then Fusion will have box mode and then subdivided mode. This is like box mode, and then you can export your model. So the size is worth noting. Now I've got another version of that already exported, and here it is, OBJ. So I'm going to download that OBJ into my downloads. Then I'm going to extract it. And then in this folder, we've got the OBJ, we've got the texture that we put in there, and the MTL file that don't have to worry about this. We just want the OBJ. This will come over. So if we go back into Blender and we go File, Import Wavefront OBJ, go to Downloads and find that file, here we go, the file, and go to OBJ. What we need to think about is that file was in millimeters and we're in meters. So if I import this at 1 and I go import and the file imports and we look at the item and we look at the size, the scale is 1:1, but look at this, it's 134 meters. It's 229 meters across. So it's way too big. Yeah, it's huge. So let's go Control Z, File, Import, Wavefront, and we need to get this scale right. So let's set the scale to 0.01 and bring that in, Import. And now if we zoom in, there's our shoe, and we can see the dimensions are 1 meter by 2 meters by 4 meters. So not quite the right size, but at least it'll fit into the design studio at the moment. So let's go Control Z and let's go File, Import, Wavefront, and let's make this 0.01, and that's the settings for meters into millimeters into meters, and go Import. Now when we look at our model, you can see the scale is 0.001 and the size is 0.294 meters. So we need to reset this. So again, we need to either come to Object, Apply, Scale, or select our model and go Control A and select Scale. And now it's all at 1. But what we'll notice is that everything's grouped and it's all in one part. So we're going to separate it. A really good question that was asked in class today was, all this is the control net and we want to subdivide it. Can I select it, press on the add modifier, add a subdivision, add a higher resolution subdivision, and then select my object and separate it, and will that modifier go across to all the objects? So let's see what happens. So we're going to come up here to Object, and we need to go into Edit mode to separate it. So we need to go Tab into Edit mode, and you can see we've got one shoe that consists of just one shoe file here. But now if we go Select and where is it? I just press P on the keyboard because I know what the control is. So we can separate our model by selection. We can separate it by material. So if we apply the right color materials to our parts, then we can separate them and keep those like colors connected. And when we put a material onto one of them, it'll apply to all of them. Or we could just go by loose parts. So then if we separate by loose parts, it's all separated and all the loose parts are here. Let's go Control Z and let's do P and let's go by material. And you'll notice there's less parts here now, because if I click on a object, let's try and find where these ones are. So object 4, there's 3 of them in that grouping. And look at this, the subdivision was added to all of those when we separated them. How fantastic. Okay, now what we did in class, I'm actually going to separate these because I want to show you something. So I'm just going to press P again in edit mode and go by loose parts. And now I should have, oh no, it hasn't done it. Really? Sometimes I'm surprised. Oh, I'm not editing the right thing. I'm editing this bottom sole. So I need to go out of edit mode. I need to select these. Then I need to go into edit mode. Then press P and go by loose parts. And now they're all split. And you can see them here, 4, 8, 9, and 10. So then go tab. And now we're in object mode. And this is really interesting because this can show you the power of how we want to create our smooth surfaces and our thickened geometries. So here we've got a surface, and in the modifier, we're going on for this object, we're going to add a modifier, and we're going to add a solidify. It's basically a thickening modifier. And we're going to change its thickness. Now, the best thing to do is, you can see how fast it changes. Press Shift, and then Shift gives you more control. Okay, so now we're 1 millimeter. Yeah, 0.001 of a meter is a millimeter. And the offset at the moment it's negative, and we can transition that offset between negative of the surface, positive of the surface, or halfway by pressing 0.5. And you can sort of guess by looking at the offset, 0.5, at here what the intersections are like, and it looks okay. It's not intersecting too much. So now it has a thickness. So what I'm going to do is just show you, if I go to wireframe, we can see the wireframe on the model. We can reorder these. If I grab the solidify and drop it above the subdivision, you'll note, see how these are thinned right out? And if we put our model into render mode, it's actually super thin here in the edge and thick in the middle. And you can see that on these loops here, how that's working. So let's reorder that. Now they're thick, and then let's add, after this, let's add another modifier, subdivision surface, and add that to 2. And now you can see we're getting a nice bevel happening around here. So if we go back into a shaded mode, you can see that we've actually got a nice geometry here, and it's sort of just softening off and curving around. Now if we click on it, right click, shade smooth, now it's shading smooth. And let's look at the back of the shoe on this object here, and we can do the exact same thing. We can go to add modifier and go to solidify. We can just click here and put in an extra 0, and then we can adjust where our thickening is going, but we'll just leave it like that. And then we'll add a modifier, generate, and we'll add a subdivision surface and make it 2 times. Sorry if you can hear my dog, he's in here with me at the moment. And then we can right click, shade smooth, and now we've got this beautiful smooth object, which was easily designed in Gravity Sketch just as a single surface, and then in Blender we've given it thickness. Okay, so the last thing to go through is we looked at how we need to split surfaces so that we can apply materials properly. And let's just drop into rendering mode, and what we're going to look at is we're going to put a material on here. So I'm just going to hide all the pieces that I don't need. And hide that. Yeah, okay, so I've just got this plastic section here. I'm going to change my view, and I'm going to, or not view, change my rendering, and then I'm going to turn on the matte cap. And we can look at it like with a clay material. We could look at the matte cap with this one here is quite interesting. It looks at depth from your perception and how it views the model. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to say shade smooth. I'm going to press tab for edit mode, and what we're going to do is go into edge mode, and we will, pressing Alt and clicking on an edge selects the whole loop. So for example, we can hold Alt and click on this loop and we can select all the way around. But I'm just going to select that loop there. What we're going to do is we're going to mark it as a seam, mark seam. And by marking it as a seam, you'll note that its colors change. And what this will do is this will be where it splits the model apart. Now this didn't, I don't know, I had a screen issue when we did this example at uni. But let's see if we can get it to work now. So if I go into my UV editor and I go over in this window and press A, and then come over here and go UV, unwrap, unwrap, and go A, and then zoom in. Oh, look how, I don't know why this does this. This is really weird. I'm going to have to look at why. Can't even see the model, it's so small. And I've never had this problem before. I wonder if it's a version 4 than version 3 issue. And what I tried in class was to press S for scale and scale it up. But that didn't really work either. I don't know why it won't work. So I'm going to have to look this week because we really need to see this UV properly. I'll just pause it for a second and see if I can resolve the issue. Okay, so it seems that it's very easy to do. All you do is drag and highlight it, right click and go unwrap, and it unwraps it from 0 to 1, 0 to 1, and it unwraps and fits it. It's like, well, why didn't you do that before? Who knows? So there's the answer to unwrapping. Now, in the UV, there is a whole bunch of ways of like unwrap, and then there is, where is it? Where's the unwrapping? Ways to pack the island, average the scale, minimize stretch, and it seems like nothing's working in here unless I stretch, split, UV, stretch, align, rotate, stretch selected UVs, stretch, and then enter, and you can see what happened. Let's go Control Z. Did anything happen? No. I've got a little bit of work to do, but I really haven't had this problem before because I opened up an old file and it was all perfect. But anyway, this is now unwrapped this. So what we can see is we've got our seam, and that's the seam here. So what we could do is we could come to the front. We can press Alt, as long as we're in edge selection mode, go Alt and click on the edge. Right click, mark seam. Now we've got two seams, one at the front, one at the back. Right. Okay, so now if we go A, and then we go A in here and right click and go unwrap, it's unwrapped two sides, and we can apply a texture to this. So for example, let's go out of edit mode and let's make a texture for this, and let's see if this works. Okay, so let's go into shader editor. Okay, let's just click on this and go hue 0, saturation 0, value 1, So now it's white, and then let's go Control, let's just press on that, Control T, go open an image, go to pictures, and let's have a look. Let's see, what have I got? Here we go. Let's see if this is a tile. So let's go open image. Okay, and let's middle mouse button, click here, and you can see how the material is applied to that UV. Now let's go back to the UV editor, select that, press tab, and we can see how these UVs are laid out, and we can see how they're wrapping around. So in here, if I go to select that island, press R for rotate, and rotate it around, and then go G and move it like that. Then let's select this one, go R, actually let's rotate it around like that. Let's go G and let's go match them up a little like that. Then what we can see is how our texture is mapping around our object. And if we go A and G and S, G, you can, and then R, and rotate it around, you can sort of see how we can get our texture applying. It's not great, and there's a whole bunch of ways that we can readjust all of these. I've got another tool that I like, which I will introduce you to. But there we have it. A way, let's go tab, of at least getting something happening here with a basic image and with a material. You know, we could just click here and go to shader, and we could find this other material that we made. Maybe it was that one. Oh, that's the sole, and we can see how we've got that mapping around. And if we go tab and we come in here and we go to UV editor, and we want to see the other image, so we have to click here and choose that, and then go A, and then we see how these materials are wrapped on. And if we go A and we go G and we can move them around, we can see how they map. So even with this dodgy bit, we can use that pink and we can get a pretty good seam running there. And it's got average match up at the front. So this is something important to think about with textures and how they work. But that's pretty cool. Let's just press tab and let's turn on the sole. So there's the sole. I don't really like how that's the same material, but anyway. And yeah, you can see how we can start to fix things. So if we look at this object here and go tab, we can start to try and get the UV mapping working well. So what we might want to do is go Alt and click here and select that whole bottom island. And we might want to mark it as a seam. Let's go mark seam. And then we might want to, on the inside here, click here and then look at the inside, go what, I think Shift Alt. Oh no, it selected the whole thing. Let's just click here, go Shift click, and Shift click, and there's another piece here, Shift click. Okay, we've got it all, yep, and then let's right click and go Mark Seam. So now if we go A and look at this island, we should be able to go UV, and note this one's scaled out properly. That's interesting, isn't it? UV, unwrap, we've got to go A, such an amateur, unwrap, and then we get the bottom and then the wrap around. And if we look at the material now, it's a little bit more interesting from how we can sort of see it. So if we go out of edit mode, we can see how that material wraps around. Quite interesting. But then we've got this UV seam here. But there's a whole sort of range of ways in which you can unwrap it. You didn't even have to put seams in. If we go Control Z, and then in here, just go UV, unwrap. Oh no, it's still got the seams. Control Z. Let's go Alt click and then unmark the seam, clear the seam. Then A, and in here go UV and unwrap. Oh, I've got to select it. A, UV, unwrap. You can see we get a big flat island, and we can fix this island up a little bit. A bit of pinching and whatnot, my favourite word. But now you can see we've got this beautiful molded sole running around because we've flattened all of this UV island. We've flattened it out, and there's a way in which we can use other tools. I'll put in some of these tools into Canvas, but one of the really interesting ones is where was it? I mentioned it earlier today. Now I can't remember. It's late at night after teaching a class, so we'll add a few more things in. I'll show you how to make this a bit more professional, flatten it out, stretch it a bit, fix a few things up. But we can go in here and, for example, we can go G and we can move this around and start to get the alignment better. And if we look in here somewhere, if we get that and we go G and we move it, you can see the texture moving. And if we get our texture right, we can just adjust it so that the flow works. That was a good example of how we might do that. So there we go. A bit of fun in Blender, Gravity Sketch. Have a play around this week, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday.